welcome to a weird huddle breakdown between that Christmas and New Year period where you don't really know what you're doing. All you know is you've eaten and drank far too much. James, how are you? Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I don't know what time this is going out, so both apply or neither.
It's all a blur. I'm overweight. I had to grow a beard here to hide my double chin even more than usual. A seasonal tradition in my household. So yes, getting ready for the New Year's Eve karaoke party that we've made an annual tradition at my house. So I've been doing my scales and my octaves in preparation.
Good to know, good to know. Maybe if we've got time before the end of the show, you can give us a little burst of Defying Gravity. That's very much the in song at the moment. Alan, you'll be glad to know I shaved my beard before we started today, so I didn't want to scare anybody too bad. How has your festive period been?
Yeah, very good. As I say, it kind of had been doing quite well the last few months prior, but it's all gone to pot over this period, and I think tomorrow's going to be interesting as well. So hey ho! Tomorrow being New Year's Day, we're recording this on. New Year's Eve. Sorry, recording this on the Monday. I have no idea what day it is either. I've just let's just be honest about that.
So at the time of recording, I hereby declare that anybody listening to this is allowed 24 hours, max 48 hours more of debauchery before you have to get back into sensible mode for the new year. Do what you like, because nobody listens to me anyway. James, I'll come to you first. Not a bad way to spend the weekend watching Celtic dispatch of St Johnstone in the way we did. What did you make overall of the performance?
Comprehensive. This is one of those games where the perfect storm of a style matchup that suits us, I thought, going into it, and then it manifested in the way I had hoped it would, which is, at least this was my kind of sense of it. Alan has a fresh view, I'm sure, with his data capture, but seemed to me as if they came in with a game plan to try and keep playing the way they have this season. It started to go horribly wrong, and then they tried to bunker and did that horribly badly, and we benefited from that kind of mismatch hodgepodge approach that they ended up having. So it was a bit of a free-for-all in a positive sense, and then our guys played well. I mean, it was he certainly had the space to do it, but it was one of those fun games where everyone looked really, really good. And so, yeah, I think most of the XG models had it like 4 plus, with them basically having 0. I mean, it's one of those where your probabilities of dropping points in the game is next to 0. It's almost impossible not to win this game. So those are the kinds. In the technical sense, this does qualify Laura as a laugher in my grading curve.
100% laugher, I would say, if I know anything about laughers, which I have. You're talking about chances of dropping points and chances of winning the game. My chances of knowing what a laugher was 6 months ago were 0, and now they are up towards the 1 value. So, I really appreciate that. If nothing else from this podcast comes, it's my understanding of random American sports terms that has improved massively.
Terminology of the laugher scale.
Yes, the laugher scale from 0 to 1, I'm firmly in the sort of 9.1 range, I would say. Or 0.91 range. Don't anybody have a go at me for that. Alan, I'm sure you'll get into the nitty-gritty of things, having just finished your analysis of the game before we started, but just a casual observation from me was that, St Johnstone very much came to park the bus and parked it in the wrong place by the looks of it.
It was a very small bus, and it didn't go very fast.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, how did it overall? What were your thoughts on the game? Was there any point at which you thought we might struggle to break through, or was it just a case of keeping knocking at the door there?
No, not really. If I'm honest with you, the kind of giveaway was, they played this very rigid 5-3-2. And I say rigid, I mean they were in their lines 5-3-2, and there was nobody was defending between the lines. So basically, Scales would get the ball and pass it to Valle. That's the 2 forwards out of the game. Valle would get the ball and pass it to Yang. That's the 3 midfielders out the game, and then the fun started. As James said in the huddlebreakdown.com in the chat, I thought he put it beautifully, and I'm stealing his bit here probably. But once you just accept that Yang's not going to deliver anything with the ball, and just enjoy it, just see how many different ways he can advance the ball up the pitch into great positions and then not do anything with it. That was great fun. And so, and then it was repeated to a lesser extent on the other side. Take the two forwards out, that's one pass. Take the three midfielders out, that's another pass. And then you're up against the fullback, and they were just so rigid. And the other entertaining thing was trying to work out what is the furthest up the park that St Johnstone could have possession of the ball and it still end up with their goalkeeper. And actually, it was pretty far. It was almost in our own box, and they still managed to get it back. It was almost like they were playing a different sport. You get 3 points every time you keep possession and get it back to your own goalkeeper. They would have won the game by like 100 points if they'd done that. It was just astonishing. They were one of the worst teams I've ever seen at Celtic Park, if I'm honest, that game. It's the only game I've ever seen on Stats. So StatsBomb have got this... based on the XG mainly, I think they work out the probabilities of a win, home win, a draw, and an away win. And even though St Johnstone had one shot, and normally that's enough for you not to, it's always less than 100% as long as the opposition get one shot. But even StatsBomb had this at 100%, probably because Celtic, Celtic's XG was so overwhelming. I think it just rounded up to 100%. So it's the first time I've ever seen that. I've seen 99, but I've not seen 100. It was just overwhelming in terms of a Celtic victory. And as James said, everybody looked good because there was time on the ball. There was balls going through the, breaking the lines easy because you only had there was always somebody available wide. So yeah, it was just easy peasy really. But dangerous game in some ways. Before a big match, really. Hopefully, people didn't get lulled into a false sense.
Yeah, before we go back to James and get some of the more detailed thoughts on things, Alan, I do want to ask this a semi-serious question because I'm still getting my head around some of the terms that we use on the podcast. So I know you made the joke about, taking the defence out of the game and then taking the midfield out of the game. What does that actually do to the pack pass scoring, if you like? Is the scoring of those pack passes in any way based on the number of players taken out of the game, or is it just based on whether that pass takes any players out of the game?
Yeah, no, it's both actually. So you get credit for. So there's actually three values associated with each pack pass. One is registering the fact. It's a pack pass, so that's one more pack pass to you. Second count is how many players did you take out with that pack pass, and then the third count is what is the value of the players that you took out, and the value is determined by the position that the opposition players play in. So you get 1 point for taking out an opposition forward, you get 2 points for taking out an opposition midfielder, and you get 3 points for taking out an opposition defender. So taking out opposition defenders is great, and this was the sort of superpower that both Matt O'Reilly and now Nicholas Kuhn have. They seem to intuitively know that even if they don't have the highest passing volume, they take the most defenders out of the game in executing their pack passes. So yeah, it's both. It's volume and it's value as well.
Good to know. I'll be totting up that score at the
if
next
you can
game
do
on
it,
Thursday.
You might save me hours of work. If you can find a way of automating it, that'd be even better.
I don't know how you do it. James, maybe not the path you wanted to go down, and feel free to take it other directions if you want. But one of the players that Alan mentioned there was Yang. I actually had this debate with my dad while we were watching the game because I was so frustrated at his lack of delivery and his lack of final product. And yet my dad had done exactly what Alan said, had a great time just watching him take people on and progress the play. I mean, where do you stand on Yang and I guess his usefulness to us, considering we've had to use him quite a little bit more than maybe we would have liked to in recent weeks? Is the cat out of the bag with him? Is there still more to see from him? What do you think?
I don't think so, but I think the embrace of that is part of the joy. I mean, I flipped it in my own head and just kind of wrote off the likelihood that he was going to turn into a final third productive, creative, attacking player. And where he does have a lot of value and he's very good is collecting the ball somewhere around midfield all the way up into that final third and getting it there, getting around opposition players, taking guys on. Like, he's actually pretty skilled in that regard. He's very quick, very agile, and in that facet of play, he's pretty decent technically, at least. So yeah, it just ends up in, usually not anything very good, except for maybe some chaos. Like, he's very good at kind of stirring up some chaos. But that it's so entertaining watching that process get from point A to point B before the inevitable falling off the cliff at point C. So I found if I just embraced that and enjoy that part of his play, it's kind of fun. It's all about expectations. So yeah, I've kind of given up on hope that, and this was when I did his profile when we signed him out of Korea. This aspect of his play was evident in his data profile at that point, meaning that he was very good at carrying the ball, progressing the ball, and then he just didn't really create much or do much in the final third. So I don't think this is anything new. And this was a kind of game where if you're ever going to have that component of your play be unleashed, that this should be it. This should have been the venue, and it didn't yet again. So in fairness, he had a couple of decent. He played that nice through ball to Engels that I think was maybe a little bit ahead of him, but and with the wind, maybe have been a bit off. But yeah, so there was a little bit of positivity that came out of his play, but generally speaking, I'm not optimistic that that's going to shift. Not to mean it can't be productive. Like, this is the kind of game where if you have other people in the lineup that are going to be the ones that are going to finish and or create, then there is some value in what he offers. It's just that it needs to be surrounded by, I think, other components of play in order to make it worth something that's actually sustainable.
Yeah, we can't all be as good as Lewis Palmer, can we, James?
No, we can all aspire to be, but we can't be.
We're both. Me and James are both as fast as Lewis Palmer. Does that count?
Even after the holiday wait, huh, Alan?
Yeah, exactly.
And the new hip.
Have a ton of turkey. A new hip. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, he's just catching strays here. We weren't even talking about him, but Alan, I'll come to you. One of the players that James just mentioned there, Arne Engels, obviously had quite an impactful performance, even though he's been under a fair bit of scrutiny in recent weeks, which understandably comes with the transfer fee that he's commanded. What was your thoughts on his performance and how things are progressing for him? Do you think he's going in the right direction as we speak?
So not to completely ignore you, just very quickly on Yang. There is utility in players like Yang. I mean, if you remember a few years back, the Rangers had Ryan Kent. Now, Ryan Kent was actually excellent at getting the ball from one box to the other. It all just went to crap when he got to the box. Considering he was in a team that like Celtic at that point, and were dominating all the other teams. His productive output in the final third was terrible, really. But he was brilliant at carrying the ball forward. And actually, in Europe, that had huge utility because he just basically was one way. It was almost a defensive move. You just got the ball up the pitch. You got it away from. You took the pressure off your own defence, etc. So there is utility in that. In theory, it's just that Celtic don't play their wide players in that way. So it's unfortunately. But as far as Engels is concerned, so. Again, I had a bit of a similar moment to James with Yang I had with Engels, which is I kind of just taught myself to just relax and enjoy what he does do well and not worry about all the things that maybe he doesn't do. Because, as we said, whether people like it or not, there is this kind of O'Reilly ghost hanging around him. And he's just not going to be, he just isn't that player. He isn't a player that, elegant, almost two-footed, sees moves 3 or 4 ahead of everybody else, links the play, glides across the pitch, plays kind of, subtle little passes and all that, and just not a hair out of place while he's doing it, looking incredibly handsome. I mean, what he did do well, and I thought he had a really good game, is he does try an early, he does do an early cross, and he's a bit more direct than what we're used to. I think that's what it is. He's not going to, as I say, be that subtle knitter together in that 8 position. Like Hatate does, like O'Reilly did. He's a bit more of a crash bang wallop sort of player, and that's it's natural. He came from a sort of crash bang wallop league, and he played in a sort of crash bang wallop long ball team. So it's kind of not unexpected, really. But I mean, some of the way that he was arcing the ball in around a few times to try and get Kyogo, and the end it was absolutely superb. I mean, that assist for Kyogo's goal was just a dream. But that was about the 3rd or 4th time he tried it, and you do wonder if that's something which he's being encouraged to do. And the first half, especially as well, he was crashing the box on numerous occasions. That was kind of a little bit O'Reilly-esque. He was arriving. And it kind of made me, the 17th anniversary of Phil O'Donnell's passing. Phil O'Donnell was brilliant at that, of arriving late in the box. Joe Ledley's another one, similar player, ghosting around, not really contributing a lot to the build-up, but they just ghost into the box and get on the end of things, and had a good goal-scoring record. So he kind of showed echoes of that type of player, I think, in his performance, which is really useful. If you've got somebody that can do that, he's a big guy, he can head the ball. I think he had a couple of shots with his left foot. He doesn't seem to faze him. If he has to head it, if he has to kick it with his left or right, he's not bothered. He'll have a go at it. So I think we just have to, again, accept that this isn't going to be maybe the sort of Celtic silky midfielder type of player that we've got here. We've got a bit more of a sort of dynamic, all action, as I say, crash bang wallop kind of midfielder, and there's utility in that, and it might look a bit ungainly sometimes, and it may, not be as smooth looking as some of the players that we've had in that position. But if what he showed, albeit against St Johnstone, but I think he just showed that he did add a lot together. I think he'd set up something like 4 or 5 chances in the first half. I think he had the most shots as well. The assist for Kyogo was excellent as well. So, and he actually racked up a lot of volume in this game. Over 120 packing score, 11 attacking threat score, which is second highest in the match. He had the 3rd highest expected scoring contribution, 1.41, which is expected goals plus expected assists. So it was a good all action contributory performance from him. So yeah, I think it was all good, and I think I take on board everything James has said in the past about his fit, but I just think we've got something different here, and if we embrace it, maybe we'll appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah, might I add a certain Stilian Petrov to that list that you talked about, very much in the same mould in terms of could sometimes let games pass him by, but come up with the goods at the right moment.
He was a subtle, skillful player. Yeah, I think he was much needed in that team because there was a lot of power and strength in that side, and Petrov was the one that had a wee bit of brains, his movement, his agility around the pitch, his ability to link things. He was excellent in that regard, but very different player, I would say, to Engels.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying listening to you both talk about Yang. You're having the change in attitude with Yang that I've had with Daisen Maeda, and what I am now coining my Daisenaissance, which is my appreciation of what he can do, and my complete ignoring of what he struggles to do, shall we say. James, I'll come back to you on Engels. Alan's talked about some of the strong points of his performance there. He's been under a lot of pressure, hasn't featured in as many games as maybe you would have thought an £11 million player has come in. We've talked a little bit more commonly in the past about how the way in which we are trying to play him maybe differs slightly to the way he was played in Germany. I guess I'm going to pose a controversial question here and see what your answer is to it. How much of the performance of Engels and how well he did at the weekend was positively affected by the absence of Callum McGregor from that starting lineup? Because I have posed the question before that I do feel like they slightly step on each other's toes. Am I reading too much into that, or is there more to consider there, do you think?
I think it's an interesting question. I think that I posted this in our chat room when I saw the lineup, and somebody posted it, was, the expectation was, and it turned out this way, that Bernardo was not going to be the type of ever-present single pivot like McGregor is, where he touches the ball 130 times when he's not being man marked out of the game. And this is the kind of game that McGregor would get that kind of volume if he, played the entire game. He'd just be on the ball constantly and kind of orchestrating from that central area of the pitch. And it was interesting that because it was almost like a reallocation of buildup more out wide. And I think Valle, Alan, you can correct me, I think Valle ended up with the most kind of interaction of play, which is, kind of different. That's not Greg Taylor. Greg Taylor does not typically pass the ball 130 times or something like that. I mean, he's intricate and I should say integral, but not to that level of volume. And I think that was kind of a reallocation of how we were playing. And, some of that had to do with the way that, to Alan's point, the way that St. Johnstone set up, where they had the kind of rigid two that were central. So they weren't man marking Bernardo, but there are also, there wasn't a ton of space in there because they weren't moving all that much. So the channels down the wings were where most of the space was. So I think we would need to see it more. I don't think it's necessarily that McGregor restricts or, the fact that Engels was on the ball more, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it was more so it just wasn't Bernardo on the ball all the time, which it feels like, and to a degree, McGregor is when he's not being man marked. So I'd like to see it more. To Alan's point, I think if we're going to have a role for Bernardo that's more than just like a squad guy, I don't think it's as an attacking 8 in our system in Europe, for example. I just don't think he's got the athletic chops to do that or the kind of box to box skill set. So if it's going to work, I think that's the role it should. I'm still skeptical it will, but let's at least see it more. Because I agree with Alan, like that, part of what makes, Engels' profile does have some significant positives. And one of them is his kind of size, physicality, and ability to get into the box. And he's shown a pretty good ability to do that. He hasn't been finishing all that well in open play yet. But again, he's good enough striking the ball from dead balls and that kind of thing. That's going to come. I'd be shocked if he doesn't get, a purple patch where he scores a couple of goals in a game multiple times, that kind of thing, where he starts converting some of these chances. So I don't see him in that 6 role necessarily. So who we got left? Like we can't keep flogging McGregor. So it was nice to see the rotation and nice to see that reallocation did work and that we were still able to, basically create and build up using some of these other guys, with the caveat that St. Johnstone did not put much of a obstacle up in preventing it and stress testing this different kind of setup.
Yeah, Alan, what do you make of what James has said there? And I guess I would pose the same question to you to build on what you talked about with Engels. How do we harness those good points that you talked about and ensure that they come to the fore more often? And do you think, as opposed to James, that Callum McGregor's inclusion or exclusion has anything to do with that?
I wouldn't read too much into that. I think the nature of the game, as James says, in terms of how the opposition set up, the lack of challenge really in the game, it's difficult to draw conclusions. The thing with Bernardo is I don't know if he struggles to get into the game, but he certainly doesn't feel the need to dominate a game like McGregor did. I mean, McGregor came on, with, 27 minutes to go or something, and he completed, in that 27 minutes, he completed 43 passes. Well, Bernardo completed 50 in 90 minutes. And he was the number 6, but he barely touched the ball in that first half. I think it was only like in the last 5 minutes of the first half that he got past 10 completed passes. But you think about how McGregor plays and how much of the ball Celtic had and how easy it was to pass through the lines. That's almost remarkable, really. But I suppose because the 2 strikers were staying central, maybe we weren't risking passes into the middle. The wide areas, the fullbacks, the wingers were always open, so it was easy to go down the outside. So maybe that's got something to do with it. That's not to say that Bernardo doesn't have the personality to dominate a game. I just don't think it's in his nature. I mean, he's not lacking confidence. He's Portugal under-21 captain. That speaks volumes. I mean, they're one of the top sides in world football, and their under-21 team will reflect that. And he's the captain, has been for some time. So they clearly see leadership qualities in him, just not manifest in the same way as maybe McGregor manifests with taking responsibility of the football. Bernardo had a pretty good game overall. He grew in second half as it opened up a bit more. He got more and more and more kind of into it, and he set up I think 3 chances, which was second highest. He got over 100 packing score, which is quite kind of rare for him. I give him 2 assists. I use as I've said before, I use fantasy football logic for assists, meaning his shot that the goalkeeper saved, because it's off the goalkeeper, Kyogo puts in the rebound. That counts as an assist in by my rules. So 2 assists in the game. His goal, his pass for Maeda was superb, but it was one of a number of passes that managed to take out the whole St Johnstone team, because even there was 5 of them at the back, there seemed to be massive kind of gaps between them as well. So they were pretty hapless in that regard. So to me, he's probably more that number 6, mainly because, as James says, Engels seems so adept at kind of, as I call it, kind of crashing the box. And I don't see the subtlety in Engels' game to be a number 6. Really, you're just playing, short, easy passes, but the right passes at the right angle, the right pace. He seems somebody more who wants to kind of get near the box and then wallop in crosses, or try more outrageous things. So probably better if you put him further forward. But I think it was great. I was really pleased. No harm to Callum. I was pleased that he got a rest. I don't know why we needed to bring him on at all, but when he came on, he just dominated the whole game. I mean, he would have been near 200 passes if he'd started McGregor against that opposition, I think. Just last word from me, really, just on Valle, because you mentioned him. I mean, two absolutely eye-catching bits of data, I suppose, on Valle. 7 chances he created, which is 3 more than anyone else. And he had a packing score over 200. That's pretty rare, right? 226. The next was actually Yang on 178. So, the second highest attacking threat score. He also had his expected scoring contribution was not massive. So the chances he was creating a lot of them were just kind of side passes to somebody to have a long shot. They weren't like massively great quality chances that he was creating, but he absolutely racked up the numbers in this game. So that I think it is an interesting and a genuine, not just a sort of manufactured controversy. I think it's a genuinely interesting debate to see who starts on Thursday, actually, between him and Taylor.
Yeah, certainly that gives us a good opportunity to look ahead to the game on Thursday. James, I'll come to you on that first. And Alan kind of framed the question for me. I guess the place to start is what changes we think we're going to see between the team that took the field at the weekend and the one that's going to go out at Ibrox on the 2nd of January. 2nd of January. Yes, 2nd of January. Yeah. Just double checking myself, what people can be like.
Same week, different year. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. James, I guess that would be my question to you. Do you see any major changes in the lineup for the game on Thursday? I think we're in a good position here where we seem relatively stable, I would say. Our neighbours across the river are swinging from pillar to post in terms of both their emotions and how they feel about the manager and the players. Last I saw, it's Clement out again, I think, after the result at the weekend. I can't keep up with it, to be honest. James, how do you see us lining up on Thursday, and how ready do you think we are to face the challenge that we do at Ibrox?
I think it's really going to be interesting because I think there's reasonable cases to be made both at left back for both people, and then the composition in midfield I think will be very interesting. I think McGregor's a lock, but the other 2 positions, I would presume Hatate is probably very, very likely. I'd be surprised if he isn't one of the 3. Wouldn't be shocked, but I'd be surprised. And then it comes down to, is it Bernardo? Is it Engels. I'd be surprised if it's McCowan, just the way he's been using the players. I don't think he'd go Hatate and McCowan, and I don't think he'd go McCowan and one of those other two. So um, my preference would be McGregor, Hatate, and Engels. I think that the most likely scenario, and there's a lot of uncertainty as far as to your point, coming out of what Rangers and how they end up setting up, both from an availability perspective because of injury, but also kind of rotation. What Clement's been doing there that some have questioned, I think reasonably so, as he's continued to shine under stress testing, as we started joking last spring with some of his decision making. So I think some of that, the strengths and weaknesses of our midfield in particular, will depend upon how it interrelates with how Rangers decides to set up. I mean, if they come front-footed and the Bang mob has them going all out, high press, high intensity, that's a bit of a different than if they're playing a more disciplined mid-block counter-attacking game. If I were a gambling man, I can neither confirm nor deny that. I would probably bet on the former, meaning that one would think if they're ever going to go berserk on the front foot and really try to push against us on a high press basis, that this might be the conditions to really make that more likely. And in which case, then you get back to this issue of build up, and that's where you need Hatate with McGregor. I think that's why I'm saying Hatate. I'd be like, if we line up with Valle, Engels, Bernardo, and they go that direction, then I would be more concerned because then we're, I would argue, less press resistant and more vulnerable to kind of a chaotic high press. Now some of that will have to do with his selection. Like if he plays Haji at the 10 and goes high press, that's different than if he does something else, Clement, that is. So but yeah, I think those are the two big areas: left back and then the composition of the midfield. And that it's nice to have options, but what I will say is that I would completely throw out Sunday's game as far as like a decision heuristic on who to pick and why going into Thursday. I think these two games will have absolutely nothing in common relative to the stressors on the players. And like, if they look great against St Johnstone in that game, that somehow infers that they'll be able to replicate any of that on Thursday. I think that would be pretty bad decision making.
Yeah, to bring it over to you, Alan, in that case, that kind of frames what I was going to ask you as a kind of two-pronged question. To pick up on James's point, there may be a little bit of pressure on Clement and Rangers here to go all out against us in a way that they maybe wouldn't have done if they were maybe in a better streak of form, shall we say. How much pressure do you think they are under to do that, and do you think they will follow through with that? And if they do, how does that affect our choices and the way we decide to play against them, do you think?
So I'll try and touch on the second one first. So I don't think it will impact our choices at all. Rodgers will set up how he wants to set up. I don't think it will have any bearing on how he thinks they will play, because actually he is, I would suggest, and I know he's more of an expert clearly than I am, but I suggest that he doesn't know how they're going to set up and he doesn't know how they're going to play. I don't think anybody does, because that's the nature of where they are as a team at the moment. So Rodgers will do what Rodgers always does. The team will play and try and impose its style on the game as it always does, I think. And it rather unsettlingly for Celtic, the squad is in generally a good place, other than, probably Forrest as a backup to come on rather than Yang on the wing. Everybody's in good shape. Players have had minutes in the legs, but not too many. Kuhn and Johnson had been injured. Got 60 minutes, came off, looked good. All that. Carter Vickers is in fine fettle. Scales has been really good, and passing the ball through the lines, etc., been excellent, really. Left back's a conundrum. Not quite sure how that will go, and the midfield, as James says, I agree. I suspect it will. Given that Hatate and Engels went off and Bernardo played 90 minutes, that signpost to me that it will be Hatate and Engels. And then the rest forward line takes care of itself. So I don't think it'll have any bearing on Celtic. I think the fascinating thing and the huge unknown is how they will line up and how they will approach the game. So to your first question, I think in the cup final it was easier for them to play a much more conservative game, effectively a counter-attacking game, waiting for Celtic to make mistakes. Because the longer it went on and the longer they were still in the game and longer it was level, their supporters would stay with them, 50-50 crowd, all that. Because it didn't matter how they won the game. It didn't matter whether they scored an extra time or they went on penalties. They just had to find a way to win that game. So it suited them setting up the way that Clement had them set up in that match. That made perfect sense to me, and it almost paid off, right? Let's be honest. So I think it's a slightly different dynamic for this game. As you rightly said, they're kind of all over the place. I'm going to really let's completely destroy any woke credentials that we had. If I say that their support is kind of bipolar, I'm choosing my words carefully. I'm not meaning to be disrespectful to what is a serious disease, and I'm not being flippant about it. They genuinely, as a fan base, as a collective, they're oscillating between extreme giddiness whenever they win a couple of games and then absolute despair when they don't. And that's not a healthy state. All joking aside, that is not a healthy state of mind to be in, right? And it can't be good for the players, right? To have this, brouhaha and aren't we brilliant and we're going to win the Europa League and we're back and we're going to catch Celtic, and then suddenly everyone should be sacked and they're all useless and they all need to be. But this is where they are. This is genuinely. I'm not even exaggerating, right? And that's not a healthy mindset kind of to be in, really. As I say, and I mean that sincerely. I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but actually, it stems from the way the team's been playing. Where you've had, when they do play well. And they have played well, especially in the Europa League, and they played well at Hampden. They look like a decent side. It's just that it's interspersed with not just playing poorly, but appallingly, really, in terms of that first half against St Mirren, the first half against Motherwell, were shockingly bad. And so we just don't. But we don't. What we don't know, because he keeps changing the lineup as well, as we just don't know how they're gonna line up. I mean, they're probably the most effective attacker is Sherney. I'm sure he will play. But after that, is it going to be Danilo or Igmani down the middle, or even Dessers? Who knows? Is Danilo going to be a 10? Could be both. Will he risk playing Igmani and Danilo as a front sort of pseudo pair? Will it be Hadji or Bajrami in a 10 position, or will he be out wide? Etc. Etc. How many of his defensive midfielders does he cram onto the pitch? And it's a different dynamic this time. Obviously, it's going to be at home. They're going to have all the crowd behind them. Whereas at Hampden, if it was 0-0 at half time, they're all getting giddy again. If it's 0-0 at half time and really not a lot's happening, the way that the crowd are, it could get nasty. I just think Celtic need to start the game really fast, and if they can get a goal, I think it could. If I say it turns ugly, I am being flippant because. And the crowd are revolting. Generally, it could get really bad. Actually, if Celtic do score a goal, it could all turn very, very, very nasty. In all seriousness, so
just to clarify, Alan, the crowd are revolting. You mean in the sense that they will revolt if the performance isn't good, not the other sense of the word.
Revolt is in the air.
James, I guess your closing thoughts on what potentially could happen on Thursday. And I'm always loath to say that I've got any level of confidence going into these games, because I think I'm too scarred by my 90s childhood to ever admit that that's the case. Given that we're 14 points ahead, given that they've had the up and down season that they've had, and given that we are playing as apparently well as we are at the moment, is this I can't even get the words out. Is this as good an opportunity for us as I feel it is, basically?
I'm still kind of squishy for this one-off game. Like I think that all of the macro stuff is, about as positive as you can get from a Celtic perspective. But from this as a one-off game, Part of the complete mess coming out of them getting the draw against Motherwell, which we've found out now should probably have been a loss. the review panel on that vicious assault that Tony Watt put on Jack Butland was
Is the
that
papers full of it? Is there like complaints flying about, statements from Motherwell?
right?
Is all that? Is that all happening, or I
Yeah,
must
I thought
I
it must
missed
be.
it?
I've been offline
Yeah,
today. I'm just assuming it has been,
right, okay.
but it's they do have kind of the makeup of a squad that can give us problems, as they showed again in the cup final. I don't think you can just write that game off. Like, there are aspects of play that they can crank up enough pressure on us just from their kind of physicality, and if they play with intensity and vigor, which is all, these are all big ifs, by the way. And Clement gets his setup okay, and his selection is reasonable, right? So there is a scenario here where they could give us problems where they create errors on us. Like, if we're, because again, let's not forget, we're going into a kind of a cauldron here. No fans. It's going to be, probably about as a toxic environment as players will walk into, given the relative mood that their support are in. So I think if they're able to kind of ambush us early, and they do really crank up the pressure dial, and we make some mistakes, which again, we've shown that we're not above making at times, um, that they could have some success. My hope for is that their defense is in such kind of shambles, and a lot of that's injury. I mean, they're basically down to Proper and Sterling as their center backs. I haven't seen or read that if anyone else is going to come back in time. I doubt it. Yeah, it looked like they were longer term injuries to Balogun and Suter. So, that's a rough situation for them. So if they're going forward and high pressing with those two center backs, and I'm actually a fan of Sterling. Like, I think he's a good utility player, but he's not a guy who has a lot of experience playing at center back against a guy like Kyogo or Maeda, making runs off his shoulder. And I mean, he certainly has the athleticism, but does he have the timing? Does he have the instincts? Does he have the spatial intelligence in that specific role, playing a high line against those kind of guys? I'll believe it when I see it. And their fullbacks are just not defensive. So, and they have a keeper who's, liable to pull a Craig Gordon at any time. So if they do extend the line forward, play a high line press, and they leave us all that space in behind, it's a matter of when, not if, that we hit them and, create really good chances. So I think it's very much a high risk, high reward situation for them. And it could break in their direction if we have some issues and makes a significant amount of errors. But I could just as easily see that, turn very, very nasty for them, particularly if we hit them early, or able to get a kind of an early counterattack goal, that kind of thing. To Alan's point, then it could turn into quite the fun afternoon.
So that's a 5-0 win for Celtic prediction from James there. Alan, any closing thoughts?
Bet the tails. That's what that's the tails are cheap.
Yeah.
I think it's similar to some. I mean, we just don't know what version of them is going to turn up. But I would certainly caution against any notion that we just turn up and we're going to give them a doing. I think that
100%.
is a possibility, right? It is a possibility, but I sincerely doubt that's what's going to happen. If they cannot get themselves up for this game, if they cannot throw absolutely everything at this, just out of professional pride, then I'd be astonished. So I think as James says, we're going into what is going to be even more of a toxic atmosphere than what it normally is, and with emotions running high. And I'm sure that their players will get that message and will be tearing around, into us really. So this is going to be a very, very difficult game. And also, professionals are humans in the sense of Celtic know they don't have to win the game. They don't have to go chasing it. They don't have to, take risks really, and that's a dangerous mindset really, in a game like this, because you can be a bit too cautious, a bit too careful. I don't think Rodgers is going to go expansive. I think he's going to keep the ball. He's going to want to frustrate the crowd. He's going to play patiently. I think we've seen in the last couple of games those early balls, especially from Engels, maybe looking over the top. I think we'll try that a few times, because why wouldn't you? It worked at Hampden, and we stopped doing it. I don't know why we stopped doing it, and it's even more likely to work with the defence are likely to put out there. So we just have to be careful we don't get too cautious, really, because it is there for the taking, and as I say, first goal will be crucial. If they obviously get the crowd back on their side, go 1-0 up, then it's going to be febrile, and it's going to be all of that. But and they do have the propensity to not deal well with going ahead and being in the lead, or being on the front foot in these kind of games. So if you look at the stats going back the last couple of years, honestly, there's nothing in it. Even though Celtic have won virtually all the games, the XG difference is tiny. If you aggregate it all up across these games, that's even allowing for a 3-0 and a couple of other comfortable games for Celtic where the score didn't necessarily reflect. The XG is really quite tight, and I'm not expecting it to be any different, frankly, on Thursday. So I'm kind of a bit wary of this. This seems like there's lots of nasty traps that Celtic could fall into here, and I think the unpredictability of it. Going into the Aberdeen game, kind of know how they're going to set up, kind of knew what their weaknesses were, felt quite comfortable Celtic could prey on those. I'm not quite as convinced with this one, because it's just going to be very unpredictable. I think almost for Celtic, what would play into our hands is if Clement feels he has to go for it, and he packs the team with attacking players, he presses high, and he exposes that back line to quick counters. I think Celtic will have a lot of fun in that scenario. But I don't know. I think this is a very tricky situation for him. Obviously they're at home. I think, unlike the cup final, they will have to be a bit more front-footed than they were, just waiting for Celtic to make mistakes like they did at Hampden. I don't think that will go down well. If it's 35 minutes and they haven't mustered a shot, I think, again, revolt, ugly, all those things come into play.
As they always do. As they always do.
They always do,
yeah. Just as a small aside, one thing I have to say that was almost as enjoyable as the result that Motherwell managed to pull off at the weekend was their Home Alone themed tifo, which I thoroughly enjoyed. That was right up my street, I have to say. For anybody listening on audio only, Alan's hands were firmly over his face as soon as I mentioned that. But honestly, it's a thing of beauty. You need to go and have a look at it if you get a chance. Anything you guys want to share about what's coming up on the Huddle Breakdown over the New Year period before we head off?
Well, we're going to review the game, obviously, on Friday. We'll have a full breakdown and diagnostic of the calamity that's going to ensue one way or the other. I suspect there's going to be calamity no matter what coming out of the game. So
0-0, boring 0-0.
Yeah, so we're going to continue to kind of cover it, leading up to it, some additional analysis. I think Alan's working on some things on the fullback position and some of the other aspects that we'll look into. We didn't even mention, Trusty versus Scales. I think most people are just conceding Scales at this point, given the selection and the substitution. But, those kind of topics we'll be diving into leading up to Thursday. And then, we'll full coverage coming out of the game.
Absolutely. So with that, we'll say all the best for the new year to all the listeners. To Alan and James, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me onto the podcast. If you'd asked me at the start of 2024, did I think I'd be hosting the Huddle Breakdown, I'd have said, no way, those guys wouldn't touch me with a barge pole. But here I am. You never know where things can end.
You never know where desperation can take you.
Yes, exactly. And that goes
strange
both ways, Alan.
Bedfellows and all that stuff. Yeah, strange bedfellows.
But here's to 2025 and many more podcasts to come. Alan, James, thank you very much, and we will see you all in the new year.